like when I start to feel normal again, it's like normal feels amazing. I love feeling normal, you know, but then, a couple of days of normal and it's just like, it gets normalized again and it's not so amazing anymore.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to live in the insanity and instead want to find freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hello there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us.
Yes. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back.
How's your post-holiday, what do you call it?
Well, it could be
it's like a sugar crash.
Yeah, recovering from a food coma maybe.
Holiday
or
crash.
Hopefully that's going well.
Yes, totally. So we are going to continue talking about the incarnation, and since it's Wednesday, we are going to talk about being centered. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you might know that being centered is one of my very favorite of the CSCs. I mean, they're all my favorite for different reasons. Sure. But this one, man, I love this principle because the incarnation is like this anchor point for our identity. You know, it's easy to get lost in just the day-to-day. I don't know, especially as a mom, sometimes I'm like, right, who am I again? Apart from, you know, like I'm the one that does the laundry and, you know, kisses my kids' owies, and you kind of get lost sometimes in just the day-to-day. And it's the same way when I had a job. It's like, oh yeah, I'm the one who answers these emails and writes these letters and da-da-da-da-da, you know?
Like your identity becomes your tasks instead of your
No,
core?
it's just that I forget my identity because I'm so focused on the tasks.
Yeah.
But this, you know, the fact that Jesus became a man, that he is God, and that doesn't change regardless of how old that information is, and that because of that, we have an eternal identity, like that is like this anchor point for me. So regardless of what is going on in my life, I can come back to that.
Yeah. I think something that helps me, because of this truth, maintain my center is, and I think for some reason, I think a lot of Christians struggle with this. They're like still wondering if God loves them somehow. And that, you know, being loved, a person who's loved by others, but especially someone who's loved by God, is such a core part of our identity. I mean, we're children of God. We're saints of God. We're called to be in relationship with him. And if we're still like, does God even love me? Is he paying attention to me? Does he hear my prayer? Like the incarnation is God showing up and saying, I'm here. I'm touching you. You can touch me. We're together. You know, I'm even healing you. I'm showing you that I can die, but I'm alive again. And here's your hope, right? My new perfect body this is going to be yours someday too. Like I'm leading the charge here into the next life. Yeah. You can trust me. And yet we still get off center and forget all that for some reason.
Yeah, I love reading through the Gospels. I was just reading in Luke yesterday, I think it was, where there's the woman that's been bleeding for 12 years. And, you know, she spent all of her money on doctors. And Jesus is on his way to somebody else's house to heal someone else who's in dire straits on the verge of death. And it was a synagogue leader.
Very important. Right.
It was somebody important's daughter who's dying. And this woman touches Jesus's robe and is healed. And he stops, which that's so beautiful to me. Like he stops and, you know, she's kind of like in trepidation because he's like, well, who touched me?
Right. She was hoping to get away without being noticed.
Right. And when you realize that according to Jewish law, because she was bleeding, she was unclean. And so she'd been unclean for 12 years. Like that is a long time to go without. Right.
She'll make other people unclean if they interact with her.
Exactly. So you have to kind of go without human contact when you're unclean. And she touched Jesus's robe, which would have made him unclean. And he's just like, it's cool. Like, you know, he says, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Like, just the love that he shows and how present he is, even though he's got this pressing thing that's happening. And
Yeah.
I love that passage. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's just so many stories where Jesus does things like that, but also tied up with his incarnation is the predicament we're in because of the sinfulness of our sin. And that's part of our identity too. We can't ignore that.
Right.
And that's the reason he allowed himself to get murdered. And I don't know. So we can't be like, oh, don't worry about that. And we can't get caught up. We just can't go to either extreme. We need to focus on who Jesus said he was and his forgiveness and the gospel of grace.
It's kind of like the incarnation, how you're holding at the same time that Jesus is fully God, fully man. Like we're holding the fact that we're sinners and we're forgiven at the same time.
Yeah. I love praying with my kids, just the fact that God's paying attention to them, that he pays attention to me is an amazing truth. He hears our prayers. And yeah, like I said, it's because he's actually here with us. I mean, that's that famous, God has so many names, but Emmanuel, God with us, we always talk about that at Christmas because that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
God with us.
Right. And if we take that away, I became a Christian when I was 14, almost 15. And I remember what it was like just being alone in the world and having to, fend for myself, being like, I'm responsible for my own life. I have nobody's there to like swoop in and help me or anything, And then just that sense of, why am I even here? When you take God out of the equation, sometimes it's hard to answer that question. Why are we here?
Yeah, it's like you said earlier. I mean, we just become then this task doing machine. Your work maybe, or you're a parent, like you were saying earlier. But that's for someone who's thoughtful, and I think a lot of people, maybe they don't let themselves think about it, but if you're honest with yourself, that becomes pretty empty pretty fast. If you're just the things you do, okay, then what?
Right.
That's just getting off center. I mean, because we are created by God to be in relationship with God.
Right. And as part of that, as part of our identity as Christians, because Jesus came and lived a perfect life and died for us, we get to be God's children. And when you think about, I remember, I can't remember exactly when it was. It was probably, I think my kids were like 2 or 3, somewhere in that general vicinity. And I remember praying about like, okay, Lord, show me how, show me that you love me, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. And I just had this kind of a like, well, pay attention to your children. And realizing, my kids never ask me, are you going to feed us today? Like, they never ask actually, they don't even ask if we love them because they know that we love them. And when we're like, hey, I love you, right? They're like, yes, you've told me 400 times.
I like
which
that.
I really love because they know, and they're never like, oh, are you going to forget to, are you going to let me keep living in the house? Are you going to forget to take care of me? Like, they never worry about that stuff because it's just this automatic, as your child, this is what I'm entitled to. And I think we forget that as Christians. Like, we don't come to the throne of grace boldly. We come in this kind of hesitant, like, are you really going to take care of me today? Did you really remember that, XYZ is happening? Or, oh no, like with Jesus where he's sleeping on the boat and the disciples, there's suddenly a storm and the disciples freak out and they're, waking up Jesus, teacher, are you going to take care of us here? And he's like, oh, you have little faith.
Yeah.
And he just calms the storm.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? Where it's just too easy because it's right in front of our face to look at our situation and be like, this is chaos. I don't know what's happening. God, what are you doing? Why is it like this? For Christians and non-Christians, it can be very confusing. But if that's all we really are paying attention to, then yeah, we're already off center there too. Because we're like,
Right.
I've got to try to fix some of this stuff.
Right.
Bail out the boat with my teaspoon or something, instead of talking to Jesus, he's sitting right there. But
Yeah. And so being able to hang on to our trust fund child status and be like, God has already provided the right amount of money, the right amount of time, the right amount of energy. He's already foreseen whatever circumstance it is that comes up. And he already has a solution.
yeah,
And we just have to accept it.
yeah. And I think I wonder if we balk at that because we believe that in our mind, but then we already have a situation that we want, and we know that Jesus might not
Yes.
give us that one, but he does have a solution, and he's got an idea of what our life should be like. I mean, he's the one that made us, and
Right.
it takes faith to walk in that path. But I think that's another amazing thing about the incarnation. Jesus didn't have an easy life. He hasn't promised us an easy life. I mean, because
Yeah.
we're living right alongside of all these other sinful people in this broken world. So if we're looking at our situation and we're trying to figure out how to patch it together to make life kind of nice, that's not going to work. And that's not what Jesus is promising either. He's promising a fulfilling life and a productive life if we're submitted to his power and
Yeah.
we're doing the good works that he's laid out before us to do. And then there's an amazing hope in the resurrection after our life. But it's not like we're going to get to a point where we're just kind of retired and on a beach and happy for like a long time.
In other words, you'll never be bored if you're with
That's
Jesus. Better has no finish line.
Yeah, I think that applies to our life where in sanctification and in our relationship with God, we're growing, we're learning, our calling is expanding or getting tweaked as we get to certain, little finish lines along the way.
Yeah.
God's like, okay, now come here with me. Okay, now come here. And
Right.
it's not like we're just getting better and better. And isn't that cool? It's this idea of we're growing with God and we're becoming more and more who he designed us to be.
Definitely.
And there's no end to that.
Yeah.
Because God's infinite
Right.
and we're not.
Yes. Yeah, I love that idea. I love that there's constantly room to grow, that we don't have to deal with the same problems yesterday that we did, or today that we
can
did
have
yesterday.
A whole new batch of problems tomorrow.
Yes. But it's still, it's kind of like, if you've ever had a toothache and when you're in the middle of it, you're just like, this is agony. And then a week afterwards, you're like, oh yeah, that did hurt. I remember that.
I think about that every time. You're in pain quite a bit with your illness, and I just can't imagine. Like if I get a headache or if I'm sick for a day, I don't usually get laid up for more than a day at a time, but like when I start to feel normal again, it's like normal feels amazing. I love feeling normal, but then a couple days of normal and it's just like
This
it
is
gets
normal.
normalized again and it's not so amazing anymore. But
Yeah, we have new problems. It's still growing, which is awesome
Which is
because
what we
we
want.
don't want to be the same people.
yeah,
And because of the incarnation, because we're trust fund children, there's room in the overwhelm. Like one of the ways that I think about it is, kind of having this like force field that's whatever your personal bubble space is, and having all that space inside where there's just, for me, I need peace and quiet to relax. I realize not everyone's
so
that
weird.
way. Well, one of our daughters, she needs like activity and people
to recharge,
in order to relax.
maybe not
right,
to relax,
yeah.
but to re-energize.
Right. Whereas for me, I need quiet and yeah, like, so having that space around me, even when things feel crazy, that recognizing there still is that space. There's room to maneuver
Yeah.
is just so peaceful.
Yeah. And I think one other thing, real quick, we don't want to forget about the incarnation too, is that Jesus himself grew in wisdom and understanding. It says as from time he was a child to when he was a man, and maybe his entire life, I would imagine, because that's what we're called to do, is growing in somehow, because he's fully man I mean, it's hard for us to imagine him learning anything, but
Right.
he did. It says he did. And that's our example too. We don't want to stop doing that.
Yep. All right. Well, we love you guys and we are praying for you. Homework for today. Just take a minute and think about how the incarnation can be an anchor point for your identity. Because it is. Whether you recognize it or not, it is. So utilizing it can be such a blessing. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. We believe the more people that are living in the CSCs, the healthier the entire body of Christ is. Which is why we care about whether you are living in the CSCs. Come back tomorrow and we're going to keep talking about the incarnation. And since it's Thursday, we're going to talk about being connected.
Sounds good. Talk to you then.
Bye.